And good evening. Good evening. We are live here on all social media platforms for a brand new edition of Science, Philosophy, and Metaphysics. And I'm here with the illustrious Dr. Subodh Pandit. And so we are going to have he's going to bring all the parts together from these past several weeks of this series. But we want to make sure that you take the opportunity to share this link, share this live because you will not want to miss anything. And especially for those who have not seen the program, this will be a great way and introduction for them to get a taste of what we've been doing and even go back and start from the beginning and they can catch up along with us. So at this time, I'm going to bring to the front one and only Dr. Pandit.
Hello and welcome. Those of you who have been with us before, welcome. And those who are joining for the first time, you are also welcome. Today we're going to do a review so you will get to know what we've been doing for the past 4 weeks. So now let's just get on with the PowerPoint frames. So, what we've been doing is the PAN process. It's a process by which we look at controversial topics and we take both the sides, place them one against the other, stand in the middle, and look at both of them. The PAN process then has 4 columns of arguments: pro and con of one side, and pro and con of the other. So we've done this columns in the last 4 weeks, and today we're going to have a review and assess the weight of evidence. So, what have we been doing? We asked a prime reality question. It was penned by James Sire, who asked the question: what is the thing or entity or process from which everything else comes? Note that in this sentence or in the question, there are 2 things. One, the thing, and number 2, everything else. In other words, the source of everything is the thing. And when you ask that question, it pulls you, drags you to the big question: does God really exist? And this is what it looks like: the great divide. On one side, atheism, God is non existent, fictitious. On the other side, B, the believing side, theism, which says God is in existence and he is factual. This is a metaphysical issue, it's a metaphysical question. What's the meaning of meta? It goes beyond. After this, what? So, what's a physical beyond which we are going? The physical is the natural constituents of the universe: matter, energy, time, and space. So, what we are doing is using science and philosophy in trying to approach this metaphysical topic and question. If we use religion, that would be circular reasoning because religion is already a metaphysical topic in itself. So we have to move away from metaphysical things to look at really metaphysical aspects from a distance so it gives us a clearer view. Now, when you deal with metaphysical topics and questions, we cannot provide proofs, but we can assess what is called the weight of evidence. In other words, both the sides will have weights, both the sides will have points, both the sides will have arguments. We want to know which is heavier. And so we look for the weight of evidence, and we're going to do that today. When we start out, there are 3 initial attitudes everyone has: the believing inquirer, the attitude of a disbelieving inquirer, and then the attitude of a neutral inquirer. We have all 3 attitudes in us at the same time. We can choose which one we want to bring at any given time. And so we said that we would prefer to use the neutral inquirer attitude because that gives us the best chance to come to the truth of the matter. So, what's a neutral inquirer? One of the features of a neutral inquirer is that he looks at both the options, both the theories, and give each one equal and fair chance to establish itself. So if you really want to be a neutral inquirer, then we must create an atmosphere for neutral inquiry. And there are four factors we need for that. All four are important. Number one, humility. Humility means a teachable spirit. You stand small. You don't puff up your chest and say, I know it all. You say, I know some, but really, can I know some more? That's humility. Number two is honesty. We said what it was. It was to give credit where it is due and withhold credit where it is not due. Honesty. We said it was the wow factor. In other words, if somebody or something impresses you, you would say wow. And I think there was something that did impress you, didn't they? The last few weeks we've done. I hope you said wow, because that's being honest. It doesn't matter who gets the credit in the end. Say wow if it is impressive. Number three is calmness. If you really want to look for the truth of the matter, then your opinion should be held secondary. So there's no need to fight for your opinion. What you want to do is look for the truth of the matter. And if that's the case, then whichever side is correct, that wins. And so you can afford to be calm. And further, if you are calm, it gives you the best chance to have a clear thinking and bring the best arguments and place them on the table for everyone to see, including yourself. Stay calm. There's no need. Nobody gains anything by getting upset and angry, enraged. Number four is respect. It's not agreement. It's not admiration. It is the right we give everyone to do their own search and to come to their own conclusion. And we always hold them and their words at a high level. In other words, always keep their dignity up. Never try to drag it down. That's respect. So, with these four, we would do the PAN process. And it looks like this: four columns of argument, a pro and a con for each of them. For example, column one would be arguments for atheism. Number two would be arguments against the believing side, theistic side. Column three, arguments for theism, and column four, arguments against the atheistic side. These columns can be addressed in any order because the arguments in one does not spill over to the other side and affect them. So you can do it in any order. We went in this order, so that's how it will be today too. We'll go through them one by one. The PAN process, the basic idea of the PAN process is to show both yourself and everyone else that you are trying, you are making a real attempt to be fair on both sides. So, column one, arguments for atheism, none. Why? Because atheism requires disproof of theism, which is column two. Just let's get back to them. Look at that. It's column two. The disproof of theism is column two. And the only way you can settle column one is the disproof of column two. So you have to go to column two. So in column one, there is really no argument there. Secondly, if you have to say somebody is absent, you have to look at all the possibilities. And we realize you cannot do that. Why? Because the universe is too huge. 95% of the stuff out there we can't even see. This is of the known universe. So it's 100% of the rest of the universe. And also, if God can move about, then you have to say that he is not there at all. You have to look at every point of the universe at the same time. That's impossible. Furthermore, science, physics, mathematics has told us that there is a fourth dimension of space, of which we know absolutely nothing. And therefore, in this column, there are no arguments at all. So, what is the strength of arguments for atheism? Here's something you can do. Get a little slip of paper and we'll look at each of the four columns and we'll grade them out of 10. I'm grading here, this one's 0, but you can put whatever number you want. And let's do this at the end. We'll look at the grades we have given at the end. Column 2, arguments against the side that says God exists. And we found six of them: lack of empirical evidence, lack of design, presence of evils, pain, and suffering, which is the big one. And then the claim that creation is really unscientific. Number five, science has shown God is dispensable. We can do everything. Number six, if everything was made by God, who made God? And we looked at each of those carefully. None of these arguments refute the claim that God exists. In fact, you saw when we went one by one, at least three of them actually flipped sides when you followed the logic to its actual conclusion. They flipped sides and came to the side of the theistic claim. So if they can't knock it off and they actually join on the other side, what are the strengths of the argument against the claim of God's existence, against theism? Nothing. Not a single one actually stood. Column number three, arguments for the claim that God exists. We found four: circumstantial evidence, sheer numbers, billions of people believe in God. So you can't throw it off. It's also deep in the human psyche. Every generation of the human race has had an idea of God. And then the presence of design. It is it has to be explained. Chaos needs no explanation. Design needs an explanation. So it becomes a circumstantial evidence. Number two, the anthropic principle, those amazing um, fine-tuned laws and rules that allow us to live. It's the basic structure of the universe, not something put on. It's really inside there. And then we looked at the logical analysis, which showed us: number one, there's a cause. Number two, this cause is distinct and separate from the universe. Number three, it precedes the universe. And number four, it is possibly omnipotent and omniscient. And this is by sheer logic. And number four, if God is really in existence, then his story is that he created the universe in a what is called a special creation, and he did it instantly. Do we have any evidence, scientific evidence, that some things happened, some big things happened instantly? Yes. Granite was formed. We saw the scientific evidence. Granite was formed in 3 minutes to 5 hours. I think some of you did say yes. So, what are the strength of arguments for theism in this column? I put it as eight, but look, you put it according to what you feel. Some of them have put it at seven, some have put it at nine, and some have even said it's 10. But you decide for yourself. Let's take a break. All right, we've gone through three. I wonder if you really got your slip of paper and wrote those your own assessments down. How many marks did you give? Column one? How many marks? Column two? How many marks? Column three? That's important because when you put it yourself, and then when we put them all together, then it will be your own assessment. It will not be mine. I would have just brought you the information which you can evaluate, which you can scrutinize, examine, and then you can put your own marks over there. So the third one was arguments for the claim that God exists. Now let's get to column four, the arguments against the claim that God does not exist, atheism. We found four of them. Number one, it makes a really false fundamental claim that it is based on science. It is not based on science. In fact, when we looked at it, the history of science, of actually modern science, is based squarely on the idea of God, his existence, and not only his existence, the monotheistic God who did what is called the special creation. That was the actual basis of the rise, the start of modern science. So the claim that atheism is on the side of science is actually false. And we saw some of those who have gone into it, how they clearly stated that it is not on the side of science, because atheism means that there was confusion, chaos, randomness to start. If there is randomness, how can anyone look for laws of science in nature? Think. If it was only chaos, there's no laws you can find. Therefore, atheism cannot form the actual base of the scientific process of inquiry, because that requires that some form of orderliness must be there. And that was the base that the theistic side provided, and said when God, who is rational in his own mind, created a rational universe, then we could possibly look for the laws of science within nature. And that is what spurred on and started and actually allowed the the basis of the modern science to not only start but to develop and become what it is today. Number two, atheism actually disallows evidence to come into the picture. Why? Because once you say something is not in existence, you have closed all doors of evidence, because no evidence can be found for something that never existed. We gave the example of airplanes. If airplanes never existed, then no matter how many propellers and jet engines and cockpits and fuselages you may find, it doesn't point to an aeroplane, because the aeroplane never existed. So the moment you say this does not exist, no evidence can be brought. So you can't move at all. You can't move to the right or the left. Therefore it becomes a dogma. So atheism disallows evidence, and that does not speak well for a claim that is made so widely and so big. Number three, it claims that everything started from absolute nothingness. And we saw that. If you really go into it, it's physically, philosophically, mathematically impossible to start with nothing and come up with anything. Let's look at the prime reality question once more. It says, or asks, what is the thing? Say it again. What is the thing or the entity from which everything else comes? So, how can you say it is from nothing? So, atheism, which says everything came from nothing, is not in a position to answer the question. In other words, it's totally incapable of answering the prime reality question, which demands the description of the thing that started everything else. And if you say nothing, then that is not answering the question at all. So the Latin aphorism, which says ex nihilo nihil fit, out of nothing, nothing comes, is a valid point and a valid argument. So atheism is actually a non-answer, pretending to be an answer. It says this is not it, that is not it, but that's not what we're asking. We're asking what is the thing. So it is not really an answer. So let's get back. Number four, the statistical analysis. In statistics, we said, and we showed that if the chance is only 1 out of 10 to the power of 50, and to the power of 50 means 1 followed by 50 zeros, and that's a big number. So only one chance in 10 to the power of 50 is describing a statistical impossibility. And then we saw that the simplest cell, to put all the components together, what are the chances that it would happen by itself? 1 chance in 10 to the power of 100 billion. By the way, 10 to the power of 50, huge number we saw. 10 to the power of 51, Sounds like it's only one, but it is 10 times more than 10 to the power of 50. So each one is getting bigger by 10. Then what about the 10 to the power of 100 billion? And that is only to bring the stuff together, my friends. You still have to put them all together. You still have to put them, you still have to tell each one what to do and how and when and where. And then when you tell them all that, well, how can they do it unless it has life? It is the lifeless thing that is giving to bring together requires that much chance. And then, of course, that first cell, it had to divide. And when it was divided, both the divided parts were alive. Goodness. You don't try that, all right? If you split yourself, you're not going to be alive. But that cell did it. And then it became so many cells together, and more complex and more complex. And then it became a little organism. And then it became bigger life and plants and animals and you and me. And then we began to think. And then into this thoughts came abstract things like courage and loyalty and beauty and love. Can you think of the list? The list itself is endless, my friends. Then what chance that it could have happened by itself? Therefore, we said if it is improbable, and actually impossible, and if it did happen, then it happened only by the action of an agent. And so an agent did that cell, and the agent did all the trillions of cells in your body and mind, anywhere from 50 to 100 trillion cells. Strength of the argument against atheism, I placed it at 9. So now we're going to go back to that prime reality question. And after that, the summary. We did 4 now, 4 columns, and this is what it looks like. Have you got your sheet out and put it like this? Column 1, I said it was 0. Or column 2, 0. Column 1, for atheism. Remember, there was none. Column 2, against the believing side. We got 6, but none of them stood. Column 3, for the believing side. They stood strong. And column 4, against the atheistic side. Even bigger, even stronger. Now, if you look at these 4 very carefully, you will notice something. That you can take any one of these columns and it will settle the whole question. Think. If you just take one, and take any one of them, and put them really into an intellectual examination, without putting your emotions into it and what you like and what you dislike, just put the numbers there and you will find that any single column will answer that prime reality question and the big question, does God really exist? So if one of them answers it all, do we need to do all 4? Yes, for the simple reason that we are neutral inquirers. We said we would be neutral and we would look at all 4. So if we must do that, we should do it right away. So you got the 4. I hope you got the 4 because you are going to do the evaluation. I'll show you what I did, and that's fair enough. But the correct thing, the correct numbers that will impress you are your own. So let's put it like this. Let's put it on top. For atheism, 0. For the believing side, 8. That's my numbers. You put your own. Against the atheistic side, 9 points out of 10. And against the believing side or the theistic side, 0. So we put those numbers there. And now what we will do is compare a few of them. Let's compare the for. So how many points for you and how many points for you? When you do that, it's the bigger number that wins, right? 4. You got 4. So when you look at the 4, look at that. The atheistic side got 0. And for the believing side, 8. So who wins in that one question? It's the theistic side that wins. So now let's compare against. How many points against you and how many points against you? And if that's the case, then the lesser number wins. The points against. So now look at that. The points against. Atheistic side has 9 points against it. The theistic side has zero. Once again, the theistic side wins. Let's go to the third way of looking at it. Now, it gets a little complicated, so don't worry if you don't understand it right now. Take a screenshot and look at it carefully and put your numbers there. But we're going to go through it right now. The third one is for yourself plus against the other. For yourself and against the other, in that case, the bigger the number, that side wins. So look at this. The atheistic side has 0 plus 0, which is 0. And the believing side has 8 plus 9, which is 17. So you tell me which one wins. You do your own calculations. How about number 4, the fourth way of looking at the same numbers? Against yourself and for the other. You add those two, for against yourself and for the other. In this time, or in this calculation, it's a smaller number that wins. So look at the numbers. Atheistic side has 9 plus 8, which is 17, and the believing side has 0 plus 0, which is 0. Once again, it's the theistic side that wins. And number 5, I've done 5. You can do it any old way you want. Number 5 is for your own and then against your own. Look at those numbers. For your own minus against your own. And in this case, the bigger side wins. Atheistic side 0 minus 9 lands up with negative 9. And the believing side 8 minus 0 is 8. What's the difference? 8 to minus 9 is a difference of 17. 17 is more than one column. One column is 10 points. Think, my friends. Theism wins at all points. Now, there are two ways in the code of law to decide. In civil cases, it's called the weight of evidence is called clear and convincing. If it's clear and convincing, then you can make a decision on that side. And the judge will bring his gavel down on that side. In criminal cases, the bar is much higher and it's called beyond reasonable doubt. Very high. And only when the weight of evidence reaches that level can the judge really say, okay, you are guilty or you are innocent. Now look at these. Look at the 5 ways. Look at the 4 columns and ask yourself, is just clear and convincing or is it beyond reasonable doubt? Atheism does not win in even one calculation, my friend. Not even one. It is, in fact, more than beyond reasonable doubt. There's nothing there. So, have we done a reasonable study? Now, if any of you, if you're there for the first time, probably, and you looked at some of the points we mentioned earlier as we reviewed, if there's any of those points you would like to repeat or clarify, you can ask at the Q&A session. So having done 4 now and the assessment, let's take a short break. Actually, we've gone through quite a journey, haven't we? Are you willing to say wow to at least some of those? That's okay. It doesn't matter which side you give it to. Say wow. What we're going to do next is we looked at it ourselves. And actually I did. You were just watching. But if you wrote it down on slips of your own slip of paper, then you also did it. So we did it. So let's look at some others who have done this. So I'm going to quote now others who have looked at this question. It's amazing how some of them have clearly stated what they also found. Here it is. Albert Einstein, arguably one of the greatest scientists this world has ever known, in view of such harmony. Now, he was amazed at the harmony. Remember, he saw the factors that allow us to live, they are always in harmony. In view of such harmony in the cosmos, which I, with my limited human mind, am able to recognize, there are yet people who say there is no God. But what makes me angry is that they quote me for the support of such views. Albert Einstein. Max Jammer, who was Albert Einstein's friend, he said Einstein agreed with Spinoza that he who knows nature knows God because the pursuit of science in studying nature leads to religion, which is God. Notice that sentence. It does not say the pursuit of religious ideas in studying some religious book, Bhagavad Gita, the Quran, or the Torah. No, the pursuit of science in studying nature, which anyone and everyone can do. It leads to religion, and religion means God. Charles Darwin, in his book Origin of Species, on the last page, this is what he said. And by the way, the words by the creator are there only in the second edition of the book. It's not in there in all. So I am telling you right now, it's only in the second one. But he still used the word breathed, which is straight from Genesis. There is grandeur in this view of life with its several powers having been originally breathed into a few forms or into one. Now, this is when he was looking at the little bits of, small things, pigeons and peas and wheat. But when he looked up at the universe, these are his words, the impossibility of conceiving this immense and wonderful universe as the result of blind chance or necessity. When thus reflecting, I feel compelled to look to a first cause. Remember that logical analysis that we did? Look to a first cause having an intelligent mind. And I deserve to be called a believer. Charles Darwin, they're his own words. And this one is George Wald, Nobel Prize winner in physiology. When he looked carefully at what can be the origin of what we have today, this is what he said. The stuff of which physical reality is constructed is actually mind stuff. It is mind that has composed a physical universe that breeds life and creates science making, art making, and technology making creatures. And a mind means life, and a life and mind cannot start from absolutely nothing. You need life for that. So George Wald, Nobel Prize winning scientist, agrees. How about Stephen Hawking? I have 2 or 3 quotes from him. Even if there's only one possible unified theory, it's called the Grand Unified Theory, GUT. It is just a set of rules and equations. What is it that breathes fire, meaning life, into those equations and makes a universe for them to describe? You still have the question, why does the universe bother to exist? He said one of the greatest mysteries is the mystery of existence. Why do we exist? If you like, you can define God to be the answer to that question. This is the statement from Stephen Hawking. And here's another one from Stephen Hawking, arguably the greatest mathematician that we have ever had on planet Earth. Here's what he said. If we do discover a complete theory, which is the same thing as GUT, Grand Unified Theory, it should in time be understandable in broad principle by everyone, not just a few scientists. If we find the answer to that, it would be the ultimate triumph of human reason, for then we would know the mind of God. Late Stephen Hawking. The ultimate triumph, then, he said, of human intellectual attainment is to know the mind of God. Anthony Flew, a few from his ideas. Matter cannot produce conceptions and perceptions. Rocks and dust cannot do that. So, at the level of reason and everyday experience, we become immediately aware that the world of living, conscious, thinking beings has to originate in a living source, a mind. Same as what George Wall said a little while ago. The mind of God, said Anthony Flew, a vision of reality that emerges from the conceptual heart of modern science and imposes itself on the rational mind. Note what it is not saying. It is not saying that it emerges from the conceptual heart of some religious idea and imposes itself on the blindly believing mind. What's the meaning of imposes? It compels. What came out then, what he's saying is what came out from modern science compels the rational thinker to go in that direction. He said something more. Go where the argument leads. That he said that is his dictum. That is what drove him when he was doing his research. And he was one of the greatest philosophers, by the way, of the last century. And for 60 years of his adult life, he was a complete vocal atheist. In fact, one of his papers, which he wrote out in 1950, became the most reprinted article, probably the history of philosophy. It was Against God, Theology and Falsification. That was the title of that paper. The most reprinted. But after 60 years, this is what he said: I have followed the argument where it has led me. And it has led me to accept the existence of a self existent, immutable, immaterial, omnipotent, and omniscient being. And the title of that book that he wrote is There is a God. And the subtitle is How the World's Most Notorious Atheist Changed His Mind. I'm just looking around to see if I have the book. I think I have the book right here. Can you see it? Here we go. There is a God. How the World's Most Notorious Atheist Changed His Mind. Anthony Flew. So, our conclusion, my friends. Are you with me? Based on what? Not your opinion, not my opinion. Based on the facts that we have looked at, the scientific facts, and the philosophical reasoning with logic, reasoning, the reasonable, logical argument that we placed on the table for anyone to see, openly placed there, it shows that the existence of the supernatural is valid. And it makes the better sense of those two. Therefore, of the two options, God exists, which is theism, and God does not exist, which is atheism. The first, theism, is rational. It is not a blind belief. It's a credible claim that can withstand rational, intellectual examination and scrutiny. Go where the argument leads, said Socrates, quoted by Plato. Go where the evidence leads, and rational thinkers agree. When you go that way, God truly exists. So that they, said the written word, they, those who disbelieve, are without excuse, meaning without an intellectual argument, without a rational justification for their position and for their stand. So with these words, let's go to the Q&A.
I am not. I'm sitting here just in awe because to be able to condense this down in a 1 hour session over a 4 week session, um, you juice that down like Pastor Myers does, juice down his his sermons and his series. And I will say that definitely the comments have been a wow and appreciative of what has been shared over these past few weeks, Dr. Pandit. I was going over, even refreshing myself, and the first one that you mentioned about that prime reality question. What is the thing or entity or process from which everything else comes? And atheism, which claims nothingness as the ultimate origin, is totally incapable of answering the prime reality question, which demands the description of, quote, the thing. I mean, right there, if you stop right there, theism wins just on that point alone because you don't have any evidence of nothingness that has the capability of doing that. I was looking to see if anyone had any questions to post in the chat. You can definitely take the opportunity now. Um, this gentleman here, or this person here, which is MPG, ordering now the book. Can you place the book back up on the screen again, Dr. Pandit, so that anyone that can see it, they can kind of screenshot it. There is a God by Anthony Flew, and I think that subtitle, how the world's most notorious, now notorious is a strong word, notorious atheist changed his mind. And we do know that it's not the mind of man, but it's the Holy Spirit that led him to conviction and the reality that God is who he says he is.
The
Um,
word he used is notorious because he was the champion of the other side. For 60 years, everyone looked to him. When a theistic person, when a theistic argument came onto the scene, everyone in the philosophical world looked to him to answer that. And he had his rebuttals at so many levels. And he kept on saying, I will go where the argument
mm,
leads. And so one day somebody went up to him and said, you are just saying that. Why don't you do that? So he said, I am doing it. He said, okay, look at this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then he started his journey 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And in the end, he said, wow, what have I been saying for 60 years? That is why he said the most notorious atheist, because everyone knew who he was and
mhm,
how he had changed. In fact, when he changed, I think it was 2004 when he changed, it was a public hearing at which he changed it.
mhm.
And the announcer who was announcing the program, he was dazed that Anthony Flew would now say there's a God.
Wow. Wow.
So he said, the announcer said this, probably the greatest scientific discovery now is that there is a God. It's there in the book anyway, if you're reading it out.
That's awesome.
And there are many other, by the way, there are a whole lot of books. His came out in 2007.
Mhm.
If I may just say a few words about the history,
Oh, absolutely.
you know, when the scientific revolution came about, it was built on the idea of a God, a one God who did a special creation. This question of monotheistic creator was the actual basis of the rise of modern science. But then once you bring it up, anybody can do the science because it is for everyone. Anybody can get into the process of doing the scientific method of inquiry. So a person who's a total unbeliever can also do that. So, what happened after that? Little by little, it became that the science took over the idea of where you got it from, and they knocked the idea of God and put science front and center. That was about after 1750.
Mm,
Then it began to rise up, and by the close of that century, it came to the top position as far as the political world was concerned when France, the only nation at that time, took a legislative action, by mind you, a legislative
I was
action to
just going to
say
say
there is no
legislative
God.
and legislative action. Wow.
Yes.
Yeah.
In their legislative assembly, they took the action, there is no God. So from that was end of the 18th century. Then things began to float along, and then it started turning around after the 19th century came around. You know why? Because if there is no God, then the theory in science should be that the world and the universe is eternal, everlasting. You don't need God if it's always there. However, when Einstein began his theories, they said, "Whoa, whoa, wait a minute. Is it possible then that the universe had a starting point?" Whoa! Because if it did, then if has a beginning, then what about the beginner?
Mm.
So they began to fight against it. No, no, it is always. But Einstein's theories pushed in that direction until they found out that matter and energy did have a starting point. And then three of the top, if you're in the science world, you'll know these three top scientists: Stephen Hawking,
Mhm.
Roger Penrose of Oxford. Stephen was from Cambridge, and George Ellis from Cape Town, South Africa. These three got together and used the same equations for space and time. And lo and behold, space and time also had a starting point at the same point as matter and energy. So all the four constituents of the universe, matter, energy, time, and space, had a starting point. And they still were fighting it. This was the 1970s. No, it can't be, because if there's a beginning, then there has to be a beginner. We don't want a beginner. And so let's find some loopholes in the mathematics. And so here's a question, there's a question. Do you know when it was finally settled? It was finally settled just 5 years ago, 2017. It's called the BGV theorem. B stands for Bourdet. He's a theoretical physicist from India. So I know
Mhm.
from Mumbai. Bourdet. V is Alexander Vilenkin from Russia, and G is Alan Guth from the United States. These three got together and looked carefully at every angle of the mathematics they had, and they said it's impossible to touch this. The universe did have a starting point. From then on, I mean, from the previous few years, it started, the pendulum began to swing the other way around.
Mhm.
It's not now reason. No, the reason came from a reasonable, rational mind. That is the one that you're supposed to give all your allegiance to.
Yeah.
And so, in the last 5 years, books have come out, powerful books on science. In fact, four of them are just dated 2021. Get some of them, my friends. And you will find that there's so much of reason now, reason and logic and scientific information, that a believer does not have to kind of cow around and wonder whether how to talk next. No, stand up with your shoulders square and your head held high.
Mm.
It is based on something. It's based on something that any rational thinker can see and accept. So I'm suggesting, my friends, look into that. Don't be led away by just words from a scientist just because he has letters after his name. Look at carefully what they are saying, and you'll find that in the end of these two theories, theism and atheism, theism wins hands down. I've seen it. I've seen it all over the world. Like I said, I've been to lots of universities, and I've spoken on some well-known universities like Harvard and MIT, Duke, York University in Toronto, Dar es Salaam in Tanzania, University of Pretoria in South Africa, Macquarie in Sydney. I mean, so many of them. And when you place these ideas before them in a reasonable manner, then you'll realize that some of them will come up and say, "My goodness, I didn't know that there was this kind of evidence there." So stand firm, but always be humble, because that's not your information. It's the information that was put into the universe. It is embedded into the structure of the universe. It's not yours. So don't stand up and say, "I got information." No, you got information from somewhere else. So you'll always be humble and state it in a clear and simple way so that another thinker can wait out rather than push it down somebody's throat and then he doesn't like it at all. So, anyway, that's the history. Any questions?
Yeah, absolutely. Um, and I'm going to end with one of the quotes that you gave towards the conclusion of the session. All right. So, MPG actually ordered the book from Kindle. They already got it. So, thank you so much, Dr. Pandit. And you did mention a couple of other books that you you'd like to get some information. So, if you have like one or two books you want to just share just off the top of your head that our
Yeah,
listeners,
I can share some.
yeah.
Some of the older ones, there's a big compendium, which those of you who like to really go back and forth on that and your small print and all that, the new evidence that demands a verdict.
Mm-hmm.
The new evidence that demands a verdict by Josh McDowell. And then, is atheism dead? That is a rebuttal to the 1966 Time magazine cover, which was the epitome, the zenith of the, the, the movement God is dead. In fact, the title was Is God Dead? That was 1966. So 2021, Eric Metaxas, Metaxas, wrote a book titled Is Atheism Dead? So you can get that too. Then there's a triple PhD. His name is Michael Guillen, Guillen, triple PhD in astronomy, physics, and mathematics. His book is entitled Seeing is Believing. No, it's entitled the other way around. Believing is seeing. Place it there. There's another nice, very nice book for those who like to go back and forth, and that is the Return of the God Hypothesis by Stephen Meyer, Meyer, Stephen. The Return of the God Hypothesis. This is most likely, and I can't say for sure, but most likely a rebuttal to the very popular book called The God Delusion by Richard Dawkins. One of the most popular books on earth. It has swept people off their feet towards atheism.
Mm-hmm.
So he wrote this book, The Return of the God Hypothesis. It's come back. And then there's another one by James Agresti, Agresti. It's titled Rational Conclusions. Rational Conclusions. And one more off the top of my head would be the Ultimate Proof of Creation by Jason Lisle, Lisle, Jason. So plenty, and of course the book that I just showed you. So if you just start with just one or two, I'm sure you'll be able to grasp some of these points well. So I'm going to give you a homework for the next 1 week. Go and find somebody, not to tell. The first step in evangelism is not to tell, just ask. Ask them what they believe. That's it. Whoever they are, what do you believe? Do you believe there's no God? Hey, tell me why. You believe in God and you believe Islam? Tell me why. Or a Buddhist? Hey, is Buddhism really gripping? And why does it grip you? Friends, the more you ask, the more you will know. And the more you will know, the more you will recognize the truth when it comes in front of you. Don't be afraid. And so I'm suggesting go and ask. Get a little bit of information. Be informed. Don't be blind and say, I don't want to look that side because if I look, I might get, pulled there. No, you're not going to get pulled. If you're depending on yourself, yeah, you might be pulled. But who are you depending on? Yourself? Really? Look, you want to know the truth? We just saw something today and the last 4 weeks. There is a God of truth. And if you want to find that truth, he will never disappoint you. Never. So don't be afraid. Go. He will be with you. He will never let your leg slip unless you puff up your chest and say, I want to do it my way. But if you're humble, what are those four things? Humble, honest,
Calm,
calm,
respect.
respectful, he will get you to your port. and you can dock there happily.
awesome. Awesome. Well, we definitely have a few questions for you, Dr. Pandit.
Yeah.
So the first one is from Lifesaver 777. Which biblical point in the Bible seems to be the one, in all caps, the one thing that changes their minds? So, which biblical point in the Bible seems to be the one thing that changes their mind? I'm going to post her question.
Which biblical point in the Bible seems the one thing that changes their mind? Really, it depends on who you're talking to. But if you're asking me a broad question and you want to take that as maybe what you'd like to do, then we're going to look at it, by the way, in some of the coming sessions that we're going to have. But I'm going to tell you right now, it is the question of whether a source can be so superhuman that he is above time,
Mm,
because we are all within time. In fact, when you look at science, for example, every every law and rule in science, it's called symmetrical. It can go both ways. There's only one thing that will never go both ways. It's called the second law of thermodynamics. It goes only one direction, has to do with time. Time goes only in one direction: past, present, future. It never goes the other way around. Every other law in physics goes two ways except this one. So humans are inside there. So if we find some source that can go back and tell you what happened, and also can go forward and tell you what will happen, and then later on you come to know that what this source has said has actually happened, it's called predictive prophecy, then you have settled that you have identified that mind. And that is one of the big ones, predictive prophecy, found in the Bible. Because those prophecies, we can date those, that it happened before the actual event. And if we date them and know that it was stated before the event, and we find that it really happened, and we're going to look at some of them, by the way, and I think you'll have to say wow at that time. This is the big one. So if you ask me for one, I my personal opinion, I don't know. My personal opinion is that it is called predictive prophecy. Did those prophecies really take place? If they took place, then the one who prophesied is above time,
mm,
beyond time.
awesome. Awesome. You've pretty much answered this question, but I'm still going to post it on here anyway, publicly. What's the best way to motivate, I guess, a young man that doesn't believe?
If the person is open, there's a way. If the person is not open, then you can't open that door, because that's his choice. So, how do you motivate them? Can you put that question up again,
Oh,
please?
sure, absolutely. Yes.
What is the best way to motivate a young man that does not believe? Remember what I said, you
Hmm.
ask him what will change his mind. Honestly, you don't believe in God, for example. He doesn't believe in God. You really don't believe in God? No, I don't believe in God. Okay. Why is it that you don't believe? And what will change your mind? What is it that is missing, which, if it was there, you would change your mind? And you will find humming and hawing a lot in the last 20 years. You know how many people have answered that question when I've asked them? Only three in 20 years. What is it that will change your mind? And so I would suggest talk with them that way and ask them, number one, are you open to believing? For if you are not, then that is the question we should ask, whether a person should be open or not whether he should believe. Do you get that? I'll say it again. If a person does not want to believe, then the question shifts not from whether he should believe or not, but whether he should be open to believe or not. That's the question you have to answer first. And if that is open, then you do the pan process, I'm suggesting, because it's the very reasonable way. It shows that you're being very fair to both the sides. And so go through all the arguments carefully. And I think that would be a good way. But remember, the big question is not how to convince him. The big question is, Will he agree to being convinced? Is his heart open? If it is not open, you can't pry it open, my friend. That's the problem. We want to go and screw it open. No, let him open it. Let her open it. And so, if he does or does not open, that's not your business. Just be good friends. Don't get angry. Don't get upset. God will reach that person. Maybe not through you. Maybe you're not the right one. Be humble. Yes, I have to be humble so many times, my friend. Someone come up and tell me, I don't believe anything what you said. So, yeah, there are people like that. So what? Just pray and be good friends. So, have I answered that question reasonably? I don't know.
I think you did. I think you absolutely did. And I would think that. I think Gregory probably feels the same. All right, we have it's actually a two-part question.
Okay.
And so here we go. Let's start with this first part of it. It says, I had heard that the universe expands and shrinks at infinitum. Can you clarify that idea? Sorry, this could go down another line of discussion.
No,
And
it is right in the middle of our discussion
okay,
because uh, when scientists look at the universe, the biggest question is how did it come? How did it happen? What are the scientific laws by which it functioned at all? So they make this theory and that theory. Today, the standard model of cosmology is called the Big Bang. It started at one point, boom, expanded, not explosion, expansion. The expansion happened this way. Now, among the theories, this is one of them, that the universe is just keeping on going back and forth. It blows up and then it becomes small again, shrinks to that singularity, that one point. It has to do that and then it goes again. But here's where this theory cannot continue because it goes against the second law of thermodynamics. The second law of thermodynamics states that whenever there's energy within a system, once the system goes through it one time, it can never have more energy. It can only have less because it has already used energy. So, in other words, it's called entropy. The amount of chaos will only increase as time goes by. It will never decrease. So, this question of expansion requires expansion after shrinking. So, there is no mechanism, no scientific mechanism to put in energy once it has shrunk down to now put in energy so it can again expand. There is simply nothing of that kind. So, it's a theory, but it breaks down.
awesome, 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 awesome. I think you pretty much already touched it because the second part of that was, but would that concept have repercussions for how things progressed or developed in our current position in space time?
Not really. But like I said, if it goes back and forth, then every time it goes forth and comes back, it'll have less energy. That it will not do it the same amount as before. So if it is infinitely, we should have collapsed by now.
Mhm.
It can't go on. So the idea to explain what we are doing now, you must explain it as a finite time ago when it started, then it goes back and forth, and we're still doing in one of those back and forths.
Mhm.
But if you want to do that, then you have to describe when did it start. And the only thing that we know today is 13.72 billion years ago. That's the standard model. You have no other model to go by. So if you go by that, then this is only one stretch. We are not doing back and forth. To do back and forth, you will have to go further back, and if you go further back, then you have to have more energy to put into when it's shrunk. We don't have those, so we can't describe our present status with a shrinking and expanding universe.
Awesome. I'm going to end this with this quote that you had on the slide, which is from Max Jammer. Quote, Einstein agreed with Spinoza that he who knows nature knows God, because the pursuit of science in studying nature leads to religion. End quote. Well, I want to thank Dr. Pandit. Thank you so much for another, incredible session. Once again, for those of us who've been watching and been following these past 4 weeks, I know our faith has been strengthened. and even our concept of expansion of really sharing Christ with firmness and standing on the fact that we know who we know. Um, and I love these four points that he left with us about even having this discussion. Well, number one, in humility. Number two, honesty. Three, calmness. And four, with respect. So we thank you so much.
So we have finished, Patrice, we have finished what we have done so far.
Mhm,
So this is a milestone,
mhm.
but we are not finished. We're going to go to the next one. You see, once you do this, uh, everyone is not going to say yes and here salute what you've said. No, there's a severe attack to the conclusion we've just made,
Mhm.
and that attack comes from the theory of evolution. So we must look at that as well, and we will start looking at that next week.
Well, this concludes this first, the beginning part of the next series that's coming up next Thursday. So everybody, once again, Dr. Pandit, thank you so much for presenting this incredible evening of this information that has blessed us all. Once again, everybody, please be sure. We watched it live, but please be sure to share the link with family, friends, coworkers, and particularly those who don't even know the Lord, and just let the Holy Spirit do what only the Holy Spirit can do. So until next Thursday, Lord willing, we will see you same time, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time here on all social media. And on behalf of Pastor and Atante Myers here at Living Manor Church, we want to say good night. God bless you, and we will see you next week. Bye.